Hi, welcome. Happy day, everybody. Welcome to the Power Lunch Talk and Workshop here at Gringo's Makerspace and Innovation Hub. I am incredibly honored to introduce Jean Marie Munson, who's here to give and facilitate our workshop. Just a bit about Jean Marie Munson. Jean Marie Munson is a publisher, cartoonist, podcaster, and educator. And she will be here to give us an inspiring talk about how to create a sustainable career in the arts and also give us some storytelling techniques. Right?
Yes.
So without further ado, Jean Marie Munson, please give her a warm
Thank you. Wow. I am super grateful that we're here. Like, y'all, we're still in it or behind it. I don't know, the pandemic, right? So it's good to see your faces and to be in this space, like to even get on a plane and be here. So I'm super grateful. Yes, this is a talk about me, but there's a lot of, I like the word intersections, and we talk about intersectionality, but we won't get super academic right now. But I like this word because I feel like all that I am in terms of my interests, in terms of what I do, all intersect and make me me. But I like to know my audience, right? I'm not gonna be like, yeah, this is the truth way in life, follow me. So I'm gonna ask a few questions and just raise your hand if you resonate with that, right? So anyone a creative in this room? Good. Okay, everyone take a pause. So when Tao raised his hand, it was really high. And that is, so that's really great because that type of energy that shows up in this space is important, right? You'll enter a lot of spaces where people will be like, who's a creative one, who's a smart one? And if you're like half, who will notice that? Like, who will notice that energy? So energy is part of this talk as well as like mental health and failure and whatnot, right? So who has trouble producing sometimes? Fair enough, right? And I again, with every question is a layer of vulnerability, right? And that's important because we don't all really know each other. Some of you I just met right now. But community is so easy to find when you're willing to say the thing that you need or the thing that has been haunting you, as they say, right? This next question is like, whose friends have been really good fans of them for over the years? Right? Okay, yes, we got 3 limbs out here. So you'll learn that those people are the real MVPs in your life before we find ourselves lost in the space-time continuum of social media. The people who know us on an interpersonal level feed us that energy, right? And my last question is, who feels that mental health has a lot to do with the tug of war when it comes to creativity? Right. And creativity is a lot like soul giving and soul sucking, right? So when you put out a great piece of written work or art, that you've just taken a piece of your brain to give to the world, and you may or may not see it come back to you, or you may see it perverse in some way. And that's the risk of vulnerability we give, but it's also the power that we innately have, right? So thank you for answering my questions instead of me like, oh, I'm not gonna answer any of these. All right, so this was a shirt I found at, it was at like a fest of sorts. It was an art festival of sorts. And it's just her handwriting, right? But I was like, this is so powerful because it's exactly what I feel, right? So I wore it to work one day and one coworker's like, I don't get what that means. Why are you trying to basically like stir the pot out here? And I was like, dude, I'm sitting in my truth. I'm not threatened by what this says, but it means differently for different people. And to me, it meant something positive, right? Like, especially being an artist, especially dealing with clientele or non-supportive circles that are either blood related or not blood related, this particular quote helps fuel the work that I do in moving forward, right? All right. Okay, so teacher mode, right? There are takeaways to this. I'm not just telling you my life story and then be like, great, thanks for making me the center of your universe for an hour. Top 3 takeaways. 1, it's never too late to pursue a dream. Whatever dream that is, it's not because I'm not like, everyone, we're gonna be comic artists for the rest of our lives after this. Number 2, your day job can build your daydream, even if it is not where you think you should be right now. It's actually kismet that you are where you need to be. And number 3, celebrate small wins like they're big, right? Things like compliments, to be like, oh, whatever, you don't really mean that. Like, actually do mean that. Like, we live in a world where compliments are even harder to come by. So I draw inspiration from everyday life, right? So this, I don't know if anyone else can relate, but I'll read it and narrate for you. So Koi, which is the name of my husband, will you wake up, will you wake me up from my short power nap? And he's like, okay. And he says, Jean, wake up now. I'm like, give me 5 more minutes, please, Koi. He's like, okay, 5 minutes is over, wake up. He's like, I need 5 more minutes, just 5. He's like, 5 more minutes. I'm still mumbling that. And he's like, 5 minutes is now 3 hours, right? And so some takeaways you can write, like, that's funny. I've tried to wake somebody up like that. I'm you in this, right? Or I'm like, you know, I get that tired, right? So this simple comic strip has a lot of meaning for it, even though I could have looked at this moment and be like, whatever, funny moment with my husband. But in creating these comic strips in the span of like 3 years, I think from like 2010 to 2013, I began to get consistent work because people were understanding, one, my style, but also what I noticed as an artist. So when you do authentic things, the people who you're supposed to work with begin to show up. All right, let's talk about some context, right? Who, you know, I didn't just wake up and be like, I can draw things, right? So I was deeply influenced, which I like to call like the meatball bun trifecta, right? So I grew up from late 80s to 90s and then the early millennium. But these 3 were like everything to me, right? So Princess Leia, strong female protagonist. Chun-Li, like I was like, wow, that's so cool. She knows martial arts and stuff. And she gets to wear like punk rock spikes. And then Sailor Moon's camaraderie and like really like, I was like, I want to produce work like this. But also they were all white presenting, right? So like, I was like, yeah, they're all like white and thin. I was like, I'm not that. But it didn't mean that I couldn't take away or extract value from these characters and wanted I wanted to emulate. And I don't know if anyone else has had fictional characters. And you know, like grown-ups in my day were like, they're just fictional characters, but how much does fiction actually inform reality, right? Like we see values. I mean, some people look at like Frodo from Lord of the Rings and be like, yeah, you know, I kind of want to be like that guy. So that was that for me. And things for you to think about, like who is like, you know, is Steven from Steven Universe my dude? You know what I mean? Like, is he the one that feels why I make certain decision making? So don't put past what your imagination can do for the next gen after you, but if you're lucky enough, the generation before you. All right, so I grew up in Guam. Okay, this is my house where I grew up in Dededo. It's near kind of Retidian Point. And growing up, I always thought like, how come my neighborhood and my house does not look like these rom-coms for the teens in the US? Like, we are not wearing like JCPenney clothes and like, we don't got no sidewalks, right? So like, I was like, I must be, like at the time when I was younger, I'll put because I still think I'm young. 30s is a golden time, y'all. Anyway, so I was like, how come, that means I must be behind. I'm getting MTV like 2 weeks late. And like you guys, you just got Disney Plus, right? So like, we're always kind of like behind in terms of the consumption and whatnot. And so I was like, am I behind? And so this is a narrative I started to create for myself being from Guam. Like, okay, like people in the US have access to Ivy League schools or Kmart or Walmart or whatever, you know what I mean? They were way ahead. And so I actually now at this age in proximity to the geography of coming home periodically, I realize I'm actually at an advantage, right? Because in a weird way, the future exists in Guam, right? Like right now, politics, geopolitics, and the way we socially relate with each other in America has been so saturated with internet narrative that progression exists in Guam because it still holds the identity of being from Guam and still a place of diversity for people who are trying to find their lives here. So I know that might sound really meta, but it will make sense if you ever leave or even leave for a little bit. Okay, so, wow. Tell your parents you're going to be an artist and see them poop on you forever, right? So yeah, it has been such a struggle with my parents, and I would say I'm in a great place right now because at some point I was like, I'm in a space and vision that has not crossed you and scares you, and that's okay because that's not for you to carry, that's for me to carry. And so my parents were both white-collar workers through nursing, right? And so they encouraged me to be a nurse. You should see me watch a horror movie. I can't even get through it. So I'd be a terrible nurse and whatnot. Still, the value of healing is still important to me, but I had to accept that I have a different modality of healing, and I had to be okay with that, right? And so, yeah, they were just kind of like, what are you doing? Go be anything else but an artist. And so that's why I put these two pictures here, because this was already late into my 20s that they started to show up in the spaces where I was like unapologetically showing up for my work and for the work and collaborations I was creating in the Vegas community. So, and I love this because I mean, I would do anything for people to come to the table. So like I also cosplayed, I was like, come to our table, I'm a clown, come through, you know? And that's, you have to find creative ways for people to show up, right? So, yeah. Okay, so college me, right? I didn't just, again, wake up and was like, I care about Guam and I care about Filipinos and I care about all this stuff, right? So like the education you get from anywhere, informal or formal, is the base content of your work, right? So I was a history major, but I also didn't really quite have access to women's history or Asian American history or Pacific Islander history, right? So I was existing in that major, but I also knew that there was a gap in my knowledge, right? So like, that's what informed being an activist. Now, only now of this year, and this is full disclosure, I was diagnosed with ADHD, right? So I'm a kinesthetic learner as well. Like, if I was taking notes on a laptop, I'm actually learning nothing. So these three things were working in tandem, right? Like, I did care about my education, but I was informally learning in a way that wasn't quite fully expressed at the collegiate level, right? I looked lazy. I looked like I wasn't absorbing, but I was. And so that actually really worked out for me in comics because I just translated the content in a digestible way for people with potentially ADHD or neurodivergency. And so I also graduated during the recession, right? So that kind of narrative our parents tell us, like, if you finish college, you'll get a job, was not the case in 2008 and 2009. I was screwed. I was like, okay, I tried to get a job here on island. That didn't fall through. They ghosted me, but it's okay because life happens in a great way, right? Like, so even here in this photo, I have friends who are, this is an officer photo, right? And I have friends who are like from Philippines, Alaska, Hawaii, and whatnot. And I'll tell you, yeah, like I look really happy here, but I annoyed everybody because my job in FASA, the Filipino American Student Association, was the history. I was the historian and I did historical presentations. And they were so annoyed with me because I'm like, guys, this is really important. This is really important. We don't want to get lost in the sauce here in America. And they're just like, shut up, Jean. And they were already acclimated and very assimilated into the American narrative and benefiting off, you know, that idea in the teen rom-com of like what America looks like. And for me, knowing in proximity of where Guam was and stood in this larger narrative helped me be like, okay, preservation matters to me, cultural knowledge matters to me. And so I remember feeling kind of like, I'm not doing anything to help these people. They've rejected me, right? Your work is not always thankless. I remember we were at a college party and there was underage drinking meeting me, right? So like they shoved us all in a closet, right? Because police came in and they're like, IDs, right? And I remember being like, I don't even like these people. I don't know why I'm hanging out here. And one person turned to me, she's like, hey, you're that girl who keeps doing those historical presentations. I actually learned from you. And I was like, wow, one person out of the 50 in the membership. So again, like, that's okay. Like when you output work, even when I show up today, I'm not looking to change, your life, right? Like I'm looking to drop a few nuggets and you get to consent what you learn and take away from this, right? So again, I had to learn how to not punch through the door all the time. I had to learn that consensual learning needs to happen, especially for neurodivergent students. All right, so takeaway number one, it's never too late to pursue a dream, right? Some people could define like, you're not quite there yet, Jean, or like, wow, you're living the dream, right? That is so subjective of what that defines per person. So I like to show this. How old do you think I was when I drew this? How old do you think I was when I drew this? Okay. Anybody else? Young people?
Middle school.
Middle school? Anybody else? One more guess.
19.
Early 20s is correct, right? So this is my very first comic strip, y'all. I drew it in ballpoint pen. And I love showing this particular picture when I go into schools because, you know, they'll always be like, you were 7 or 8. And I was in my early 20s, right? And I didn't even have like a formal art career, like right out of the gate of college when there were no jobs and I was rejected for jobs. I remember even there was somebody who gave me a job as a receptionist and I was like, great. And then the next day they're like, yeah, we gave it back to the person who quit. I was like, no, you know? So all in all, like this just starting was really hard, right? I'm a history major and I'm starting to draw things, but I was like, you know what, let's see what the trajectory could be if I kept going, right? And so your work evolves over time when you invest in yourself, right? So again, I don't know if anyone, this is Miss Kiyoshi Tao, so yeah, it was very experimental about what my paneling would be, and then over time with people who wanted to see me win in terms of, and not a lot of people wanted to see me win, they gave me critiques to just try to develop and be better and find some means to just better my craft. But again, you always start somewhere, right? So these are particularly different from the first photo that I showed you. And so yeah, as you chip away at it, it grows, it gets better. So have a little faith. Takeaway number 2, your day job can build your daydream. And this is a disclaimer, can't say that I didn't say this, but tears might be involved in the process, right? So yeah, I worked food and retail for all of my 20s and a little bit of education in there, like education jobs. But yeah, I will look into this small video of my past. And this is the question I want you to ask when you watch this video. What do you notice about me then that is still me now, right? We used to make cool rabbits at the bakery job, but I'm gonna play this for you because I think it's good and kind of informative.
And I'm one of the 30 AI voices from Speechway.
So again, what do you notice about me then that you still notice about me now?
That's because I understand.
Oh, let's skip ads, sorry. Okay.
Hey, I'm Munson and I work at Great Harvest. Why are we here at Mark Street? Because this is a cool sandwich station. We make bomb sandwiches like our friends at Verizon. I love camera. That's my move right there. Oh, there she is. I like craftsmanship. I believe in like working with your hands. You should meet the people who make your things. Guaranteed to be exactly that. Not some weird chemical that's going to turn you into an accident or anything. I'm a cartoonist, I teach aerobics at the rec center, and I'm a comics activist. I like tell people to read comics. I draw caricatures, I do window art. I say, care about your neighbors, people. You should talk to them. Quit looking at your phone. Care about your people in your life. I'm just saying, just go talk to your customers. Like, how's it going? Like, how's it going? Eye to eye. That's what I also like about it. It's like, we're actually a family. It's not like, but I only got to see Kara again, you know? Like, it's like, I get to see Kara again. That's awesome right here. And look at it. He's an extra in our film here. It's tasty, it's simple, and it's real. So, my favorite bread is cheddar garlic. My husband complains that maybe it gives me garlic bread, but I can guarantee you it's tasty.
Jean is very enthusiastic. She is very bubbly and happy.
This is the picture picture. Investigation.
And she's great with customer
Are you
service.
trash about me? Take your time, sir. Let me know if I can help you.
And she is ninja.
Never knows, never knows I'm a ninja. The people behind this counter aren't just people serving me bread. They're dynamic and super awesome, and I'm glad to know. Can you guys just come into the store and give me something to do? Talk to me. Just love me back. Just show up. I'm Jean Munson. I'm a cartoonist and a secret superhero. And tell anyone that. Just buy our bread and say hi. And I work at Great Harvest. Most people hate themselves. They're always like, I'm not cool, I'm not pretty, I'm not thin. So just love yourself, dude. Do you grow? Keep it a frill. Like Great Harvest. Preach.
Okay. All right, so back to the question. What do you notice about me then that you notice about me now?
You're still bubbly.
Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you. I'll take that.
Then and now, right?
Yes, then and now.
The space that you're also cultivating who you are is not in a bakery. It's
Yes.
also outside the bakery, in the community, or be engaged through your books, and that's the outside work that
Yeah.
involves
Yes.
bakery too.
I didn't plant towel there. Yes, so even if I'm working this day job at minimum wage, I consistently say I'm a cartoonist, I am this, I do other things. And so if you keep speaking that into yourself, you will find yourself into that career, right? Like, I would have worked at that bakery forever if I did not get a work injury that I thought, it's the end of my life, there goes all my free sandwiches. No, at some point I was like, okay. And I ate a lot of free sandwiches. At some point, we'll go back to that. At some point, sometimes I think about all the bakeries that I worked at, and I think like, wow, now I work at a university, now I have this career in art, now that I own my own company, because at that point, one, I was learning how to run a business and how not to run a business. So it was unofficial business school. And the second thing that I learned in this job was that, am I going to continue to work for people who don't care about me? You know, and I laid all my cards all the time. And so, you know, unfortunately, the universe was like, it's time. Sorry, I had to cut your fingers while this happened. All right, so takeaway number 3, celebrate small wins like they're big, right? When you get a compliment or when you finish one sentence in the novel that you're writing, that's a big win, right? And so that's very tough, right? Because who would even say that waking up is a win? Anybody? Good. That's a great space to be in. Well, you know, for some people it's like, that's really corny. But as somebody who's spent some time in the hospital helping care for people, waking up is a huge, huge win. And so starting to reframe that mindset in thinking like, wow, I get another chance, I get another opportunity, I'm gonna take the day, your whole universe begins to shift in terms of wins, right? Okay, so here's one of my many failures. I got rejected by the Center of Cartoon Studies, but I took advantage of their scholarship because I had a minimum wage job, right? And so I was able to attend for a summer their program and learn everything there was to make comics, right? But I also learned when I was in Vermont that if I had spent the 2, 3, 4 years here, I wouldn't have been inspired. Like sometimes geographically where you are is where you make your best work, and Vermont wasn't it for me, right? And also my persona, having been from the islands and treating everyone like family, was threatening to people because they found my disarmingness as a way of stealing their work. And I was like, no, there are actually people living in this world who operate this way, and they're from Guam, you know? And so that was like, whoa, I don't know if this is it for me, right? Like that's like me being like, I'm gonna go to Harvard to become something, and be like, they're like, wow, this wasn't for me, right? So understand that when your body is speaking to your mind like, this ain't good, and listen. All right, so I always worked 3 jobs, y'all. While doing my art career, I was teaching aerobics at the community center, as you heard. I worked at the bakery as the manager, and I worked at a nearby daycare teaching art. And all 3 have really informed each other, right? So I learned how to manage a company. I learned how to hype people around me, and then I learned how to pave new ways for generations to come after me, right? Like, so all these things, like I said, in the intersection work in tandem to the thing that you want, right? So, you know, sometimes people are like, are you gonna be an artist, you're gonna be a nurse, you're gonna be a mom, or you're gonna be a manager, right? Like, people are constantly trying to shove you into different little like boxes. Like, this is right now, I'll tell you this, you can do it all. They may come at different seasons, right? But you can still do any of those things. You know, my student who wants to be a stand-up comedian, she's like, I guess I'm giving that dream up forever. I'm like, for now, you know, doesn't mean you're gonna stop being funny. And so learn what your interests are and still hang on to all of them. You do not have to compromise that, you know, at all. I will tell you this right now, as somebody who's worked 3 freaking jobs, you know? And so, yeah, I was talking about my work injury. It was a family business where they promoted their son ahead of me, who was straight out of high school. He never knew how to manage. I had a college degree and I was working here. And so one morning where he wasn't really even training us and I was training somebody, I cut these 2 fingers and I was just bleeding out, right? Sorry that it's graphic, but nobody else on my staff knew first aid. And so I was like in the manager's office bleeding out, and my parents came to help me. And my employers wanted me to work the next day afterwards, and I was still bleeding profusely. I gave up a lot, right? I gave up Muay Thai kickboxing because it didn't feel the same on my fingers anymore, all these things, like, because of this job. And yeah, I came to the revelation, like, who am I living for at this point, right? And I mean, this is free design work that I would just put on their windows because I was like, whatever, man. I didn't understand what my worth was then as I do now. And so in that kind of interim of like being unemployed for a month, I started Plot Twist Publishing. And all I did, I wasn't like, I'm gonna go down to the bureau and create an LLC or something. I was like on Facebook like, hey, who wants to start this with me? Meet me at a diner, right? And some of those beautiful things happen in your life in an informal way, when they're grassroots, when you can read each other's passion, that stuff happens, right? What we did, we didn't wait for validation from like artists from New York or California to tell me or us that we could make comics. And so in doing that and collaborating at this very same diner we meet every year in April, we realized the opportunities we created for Nevada, a lot like what G3 is doing for Guam, right? And so that's super important. And I've had the opportunity to just help people also create, right? Because at some point, yeah, we are grassroots, right? We don't have millions of loans helping people to do the damn thing, but we can still have value in sharing the skills to create their own, right? So when other comics companies pop up in our valley, they ask us how it's done, and we don't keep any secrets. We don't keep any secrets. We share our resources. We like coach them on their stories and whatnot. So again, when you meet gatekeepers in your life, reevaluate that you do not want to be that, you know? So yeah, after a while, I was realizing not a lot of people had access to comics education in our valley, and art school's really expensive. So after coming back from that summer school in Center for Cartoon Studies, I had also learned more fundamental ways of doing art from an art mentor, right? So it's my money going straight into the pocket of somebody else without like the registrar taking their cut, right? And so we, to this day, still benefit from a copacetic relationship from learning and teaching each other. And so yeah, if you can't afford a formal education, seek mentors in your area because they know what it's like to have limited resources. So pooling it together is only helping each other win, right? And so after a while, I was on a steady circuit with the Girl Scouts doing their like comics workshop. I was the only one in the valley giving them comic badges. And it was just incredible the stories they came up with as little girls. And then, yeah, to me, it was phenomenal and a miracle because I started to get a lot of paid gigs from having done this stuff. All right, so this is kind of my shining moment, but also a year of burnout, right? So I was lost in the sauce in the Me Too movement, right? In the Women's March, right? I remember drafting the art for this in December, and my colleagues, who are mostly males in the comics industry, were like, that's dumb, you know? So when my stuff got chosen and was highlighted by the Rolling Stone, people were like, hey, that person really is trying to do something, right? And every time that I have elevated, I've never not credited who I was or what I do when it comes to being from Guam. And that's important, right? That really sets you apart in a great way, right? We pay homage to the place that has built us and molded us, right? So, but also I began to say yes to too many things, to the point where it's like, what are you doing, you know? Because I was like, I'm gonna save the world from patriarchy this year alone. And, and then I realized like, movements are not fast, right? And that's okay because it's a collective effort, like a baton passing, right? But yeah, I was so radical to the point where I was like gonna hurt people. And I was like, whoa, let's take it back a notch here. And so I'm telling you, like when you put out the energy to manifest moving into whatever career or wherever you want to see your practice, your creative practice, it starts to come to you, right? Like people either read that energy or see the credit in the work that you've been doing, right? And so I will tell you, I don't have a higher degree. My biggest pride right now is I will be a badass with a bachelor's, right? And so when I was invited to be a professor in fall 2019, I was like, no way, this can't be happening, right? And I remember sitting at like our faculty section meeting, they're just like, and where'd you get your master's? And I was like, I don't have one. And so, yeah, I was like, I asked my chair at the time, like, why'd you choose me, right? Because it's like, it just didn't register like this opportunity. He's like, this generation cares about illustration and art in that format. He's like, it's time to bring somebody local who hasn't been tenured, who hasn't had to fight their way through in terms of being in and out of the industry. He's like, you have that and you can give that knowledge to our students. So I was one of the only professors at UNLV who, for their final, sold their work. So when they came in at the last day, they had envelopes of money. And they were like, you taught us how to survive and take care of ourselves way beyond this 100 level class. And I was like, that's important, right? Because everyone always says artists are gonna fail. No, we just have to know when to protect ourselves, whether it's financially, the law, in collaborations and whatnot. And so, yeah, and all of my students have kept in touch with me. And sometimes I'm like, they're just being nice, but most times I'm like, no, every time we have a semester, it's magic, right? And I have to honor that. I have to honor the energy they brought. So I still have a lot of love for my first class. And I'll tell you, I messed up, right? So of course, you know, I dress like this, right? So I remember having a kitty backpack. I came late and I read my class wrong and I was the last one in. I was like, is this Art 108? And they're like, no, it's 107. I was like, oh, right, I'm your teacher, right? Like, and they were just kind of like, what the hell? And so, yeah, they taught me how to be a better educator. And so, and even in this space, we constantly teach each other how to be better in every shape, way, and form. All right, so how I personally coped in the pandemic, right? So everybody in these 2 years in Vegas was like, I'm gonna be the next J.K. Rowling. I'm gonna make a book, a novel in this. And I was like, I'm standing still, y'all. I don't know, there's a lot going on. The world is on fire, I don't know what's going on. And so I started to chronicle like how being indoors looked like for me. And so I wanted to share this one of remote work, right? And I was a lot more looser with my colors, like try to be more watercolory. And so, yeah, remote work, and then this is a common theme in our marriage. This is why it works. I should have. And so then, and so, yeah, like if anyone else can relate with this, like, right? Like we just became indisposable to each other when we were remote, and it had its toll on us, right? And so again, this comic strip was highlighted by Nevada Humanities in terms of like, hey, somebody's capturing this. So, hey, I got COVID in 2020, pre-vaccine, right? And I was sick with my mom, who was a nurse. And so we worked together. Actually, she just expounded a lot of knowledge in terms of like how to get through COVID without the vaccine. And so I chronicled it in this, How 2020 Taught Me How to Live. And most people don't initially pick this up because they're like, screw 2020, it's behind me. But I've had feedback from people who've read this thing that this has saved their life because I chronicle what each day looks like on COVID in the 2-week span. And I also, there's a resource page of how to you know, how much vitamin C you should be taking, and that was informed by my mother, right? Like vitamin C, sleep, walking, all this stuff. And when I posted this for more accessibility in the last year in 21, I was shadow banned because yeah, there are profits to be made when it comes to the vaccine or the funding right? So it taught me that there's really a lot of power in when you publish for yourself and by yourself. And yeah, like this particular one ran out in Arizona, and they have, you know, more conservative politics, but at least it still helped communities of color who don't really seek health insurance, right? Like, and I recognize that. But there's also, in the last page, I talk about the mental health shaming of it, right? Like I didn't tell a lot of people, and that hurts people, right? Because in your brain fog, you begin to have apocalyptic thinking, which they don't talk about, because you start to think, I deserve this, I'm gonna go, that was it for me, right? The social stimulation that you still need from either even watching Netflix or a phone call will help you incrementally get better at health. And I discovered that, right? I discovered that just from being regular Jean and making notes. So the journaling you do, the doodles you have in old notebooks, that's content gold. That's original thought. So especially in a copy and paste world, it's super, super important to not toss those or to think little of them. They're actually huge ideas. Right, and so after I started my company, I was just like, let's keep making comic anthologies, right? And so this particular, these publications were made for my semester students who went with me in the pandemic. They couldn't have those art shows anymore. And so it gave them an opportunity to get a publishing credit. So it just brings me with pride. Although I will say, and this is full transparency, I've had students drop out of college. And I'm like, damn it, it was me. But a lot of them have the same commentary. They're like, it's not that I didn't want to learn, but I learned from you that I should live a little bit more. And I was like, well, yeah, one vet, he was just like, I thought he hated me, but his classmates were like, no, he quit school to go travel and like learn to live. Because my prompts were like, what's your biggest fear? What's you know, what's a good first time moment for you? And he always sat there without a feeling. And he realized just a little bit more and that he should live. And it's not me being like, you need to go live, right? That people come to their own self-actualizations when I'm in the space, and I'm grateful for that. I mean, I come to it too, so I'm just all about collaborations. If this is like the millionth slide, they'll be like, teamwork is a dream. Okay, so bonus takeaway. And this, you know, the context of this is like having lived on the island, having been Filipino, this is very radical, right? In other spaces in America, they're just like, so what, right? So, but stop asking for permission to do things. Build a system of validation and access for yourself and others, right? You know what, if I waited for my parents to be like, you're a good kid, I've been waiting forever, right? So like, it's so important to start being that person, right? Like when I met Amanda in April, I was like, I'm in a space of gratitude. And I mean, it sounds really hippy dippy, but it's like, I meant every word I said about it, right? So yeah, being constant validation of each other. All right, so life isn't linear, right? Like I was like, you know, and that's important because it makes it exciting. And again, it creates content, it creates room for collaboration. So these are all the things that I do, right? So I'm a podcaster. Again, this was out of fruition from...
I love that so much.
I was just hanging out in a college class that I was auditing. And everyone was like, how come you never hear it for finals? And I was like, I don't actually go to school here. And so it was an Asian studies class, and I was just kind of like, and then they were like, we're thinking about a podcast class. And I was like, cool, I'll hang out that too. And they never actually launched their podcast, but the one student I kept hanging out with after class, we were like, you know, we're gonna do the damn thing. And so we started this, which was the first comedic Panay duo called Bruja Baddies. We wanted to reclaim the word Bruja. And so, yeah, we're still going strong. It has taken a more route to highlight queer voices in our podcast. It's just been a golden time, right? A lot of the podcasts at the time were by solo Panays and stuff. So yeah, it was just like, yeah, we're two big girls laughing it up. And then I got to teach, right? And this is all it's just kind of surreal, but in a great way. Publish, right? So I always show this picture, like, I mean, I could have done one book, but I kept going, right? So just not waiting for somebody to be like, okay, next year we'll publish it. And I was like, no, we're doing it today. I'm also a program coordinator, so developing new leaders is very important for me, but also they took care of me. Like, so in 2009, I went to a leadership program and I was like, I don't even know what this is about. And now I run that leadership program, and it helps produce women leaders in every aspect. So we have people running for office, running their own nonprofits, all that stuff. And I get to be part of that. And I know that I'm good at it because it helped me, right? So when you're in a space to give back, to pay forward, it's a lot more fiery because you're part of the impact. And then being an artist, right? That was my first art show with all my comic strips. And it's really funny because now when people see my husband, they're always like, you're that guy, you know? It's really great to share those moments that, you know, he's an introvert and he inspires me, right? So it doesn't always have to be high energy, balls to the wall like me, like people who are just make you feel comfortable or safe, they inspire you, right? All right, so again, a recap in case I forgot or you forgot what the top 3 takeaways are. It's never too late to pursue a dream. And it doesn't have to be a career dream. It could be just like, hey, I just want to run for 10 minutes today, you know. You get to hold what the metric looks like. Number 2, your day job can build your daydream, right? Wherever you are, even if you're at your daydream and you're like, yeah, this isn't for me, you get a choice in that, right? You can't just be like, well, Miracle always sees me as an artist, so I guess I'm gonna do that for 10 more years. Don't do that, man. Don't live for somebody else. And number 3, you know, celebrate small wins like they're big. You know, I call this space right now in this moment a win, right? I call every tomorrow also a win, right? If I get to be and live in it. So just really great spaces for learning and living. All right, so this is a sneak peek into my current project. Do I have enough time? I don't know what time it is. Hey! I try to be on top of it. Okay, so this is my current project, Stretch Marks. So again, everything kind of feeds back into the value of self-love and body positivity. That 2018 gene's still in there, you know. And it was successful, right? It is amazing who will show up for you. Even like obscure classmates who you think really didn't like you, they threw into my campaign. So it might be your own anxiety to be like, Tao hates me, you know? They might be actually really into you, right? So it was very magical, and still working to finish it, y'all. Okay, so this is the first page, and it says, can you remember all the marks in your life that stretched you? Moments you thought you'd break. And so, yeah, this is all younger genes pulling current me, in different directions, right? And it's an image that perhaps you can relate with. So the next page, right? And so this is actually 2 pages, but when the person opens it, they see it as a full comic strip. And there are 3 stages of my life: as a little child, as a middle schooler, and as a grown person. And so I'll narrate this for you. So we're at a party, right? There's like little highlighted me. My aunt's waving us down, and she said, wow, Jean, you're Tabat now, right? And so I put a little asterisk that it means fat. So every time I look at the stretch marks on my skin, and then there's like sad, like there's a lot of power in silent art, right? So here's me coming down from my ramp. This is my brother and his friends playing basketball. My brother is motioning for me to come over here. And my brother says, one of my friends says you're fat, right? And so there's, again, this silent kind of like terror of like what they think of me. Then here's me and my dad. And then I say, I think she's the prettiest one in the family. And he says, you'd be pretty too if you lost some weight. So again, there's not even dialogue, but you as the reader can fill in what's already happening psychologically, right, in these moments. And I say, I see these moments replay in my mind, right? So I, in Vegas, am reputable for making very poignant and like emotionally vulnerable comics. And so when my colleagues are like, well, Jean's not producing, I was like, you're not ready for this. You're not ready for this. So I have to sit in my confidence, be like, yeah, does it look like I'm sit and stewing? Yes, but will it be magical? Absolutely, right? And so this was the prologue, right? So it says, welcome to Stretch Marks, a story of falling in love with my body, myself, and my mind, right? So it's not about weight loss. It really is about everyone's perception then feeding into how I begin to measure myself, right? And so, yeah. And so as an homage to the lead to the last page is the little car, right? And so on that. All right, so I would be remiss if I didn't shout out some people that I've met over the years. 3 key people who I love dearly, who are just kicking butt where we are. But I love this guy, Sonny Chargaloff. You guys know? Hopefully we're having coffee Monday. Apparently everyone knows him as a fighter, and I know him as like this comics person, but when we were doing a horror book one time, he's like, I don't know, you may not know me, but I'm from Guam. I was like, bro, let's work together, right? So he just made 4 pages, just 4 pages, and he's crushing it now, right? And he didn't need me to do that, but he was like, he found community with me, right? The whole goal of whoever I speak to or teach is that you get to be better than me. And I'm like, I have so much love for this guy. And he's a UG alum. Here's Arnell Baluyat. He grew up in Guam too. They're called NinjaBot in Vegas, and they're just crushing it. They designed for Funko, but I had to like dig his social media to. He doesn't always say like he's in Guam, but when he does, I'm like, bro, louder for the people in the back. And so yeah, he did this one with Sirena, and he was trying to build community on it, right? And then we went to art class together at Academy. Christine Backtad, she did Little Girl Big Dreams, one of my favorite children's book of this year. So y'all check it out, y'all. I mean, give it to all the kids you know. It really celebrates how women are in our society at such a young age. So get it. Yes, she does all those I Heart Guam murals. She's quiet, but she's mighty. Okay, so I don't know if there's time to make a comic strip, but if there's not, I will just show you 3 methods into making a comic strip. Sometimes when we think comics, we're like, time to write an epic Lord of the Rings story. A comic strip serves as the sentence of what will be a potentially comic book or graphic novel. And if you can't construct the simple punchline in a few boxes, you're gonna get lost in the sauce in trying to make a prolific work. And this can also be translated into storyboarding, right? Like this is super important. I have a number of students who transferred from my class into animation, right? So the fundamental basics of creating a simple story are super important. All right, so these are key things to remember. These are key things I teach in every class. It's not an art contest. What you make is your truth. Number 2, if you draw stick figures, animals, monsters that represent you, that's okay. You know what? I mean, why do we love Pokemon so much, right? They don't actually look anatomically like animals, but we love them, right? So it's okay to experiment with what other figures look like. Number 3, speaking positive affirmations during your act of creation and speak them to your peers too, right? So it does nobody any service when you're like, this is, you know what I mean? Like that vibrates with the people around you, and then they'll turn to you, and then you create a culture every moment you're living, right? And so like, yeah, if you're hating on yourself, even in your posture of making, that informs your work. You're laying that out in the piece of brain you're giving. Number 4, do not erase, right? So especially when we're talking about G3, right? We're trying to conserve resources. So a lot of what happens in the classroom is just like they draw it and they throw it away. They draw it and throw it away. In my class, they have a composition notebook where they can't tear out the pages. I'm just like, just draw an X on it, and it helps you accept your own humanity and have the courage to move on. And you'll be thankful because when you look at that years from now, you'll be like, wow, I used to draw like that, you know? So these are things that I definitely want you to remember. And then this is super important. This is like my #1 rule for everything. Have fun, experiment, and entertain yourself. If it's funny to you, does it really matter to anybody else, right? That's how memes have existed over the last 10 years. It was funny to that person, and sometimes they don't make sense to me, but they're funny. There's a community out there that can appreciate a good meme, right? So again, if memes can do it, you can too. All right, so again, I will also share this in case you need to. Sometimes I crack these jokes at night. I'm like, this is a good one. So yeah, drawing is like working out. Own your flexing your creative muscle, right? So I've had this one student in this past semester, he was like so good, but he could not stop drawing buff dudes. And I'm like, dude, just have fun with it. Draw a cat or a woman one time. And he's just like, no. And yeah, like it's once you allow yourself a little bit permission and freedom, it will be amazing what you create, right? So again, it's not as hard as six-pack abs. All right, so these are potential topics that I talk about or like usually do in the drawing exercise, but you'll have access to this, like, you know. So a to-do list of things you did today. I've had students who drew that in 4 boxes of them picking their nose, and I'm like, great, that's art, you know. The second thing is your favorite things in 4 boxes, and I'll show you a sample of what somebody had done, and then a short story, kind of freestyle version, right? So things to think about, right? And so here's, again, I love this because it's on lined paper, right? We didn't have to buy expensive Bristol paper. If you can create with cheap materials or broken things, you can create anything, right? Because there's a lot of inhibition when like someone buys a new tablet or like the latest Photoshop, they're like, okay, I'm gonna start. And then they never do that. So like, yes, once you like get in the practice of working on simple materials, you can do anything, right? So this is by Jason. He woke up, went to a bus stop in class and going home, right? And you could be like, that's a pretty plain one, but look at his perspective on just this regular dude, right? So like, again, great art was made. Are these boxes perfect? No, right? Like, so again, using simple materials. All right, favorite things, right? This one's a kind of silent one. There's no comic balloon, right? They love their cat, they love ramen, they love yoga. Look at the way they even drew their yoga person. It's not just a person, there's a glow. Right? That subconsciousness of what yoga makes them feel like showed up, and then they love art supplies, right? So you'll be amazed, like, she probably doesn't even know I'm still showing her art, right? It inspired me. And so, yeah, you'll be, like, for anybody who is a fan of manga and anime, like, there's a language barrier between you and that creator. Did they even know a type of fan like you would exist? No, but at the same time, you're empowered by their work, and then you will be the person to carry the baton in that direction, right? So this one's a freestyle with a story ending and punchline, right? I love a student because they put what each scene does, right? Establish, there's a plot twist, and a resolution. So she goes to the hair salon. She says, your regular hairdresser is not here. Fine, remember only a trim. Now just stay here. Look how she decided this was gonna be a smaller word balloon and then drew it darker, bigger, right? So she didn't erase, she just pulled out the line that needed to be seen. And then, so the twist here, I said a trim, and then they're like, I like it. And so she says, you know, I actually love it, right? So it's a simple moment of a bad haircut that actually turned pretty positive, right? I couldn't draw this. That was an experience she turned into for herself, right? So again, own your creative power. Okay, so usually this is pair share, but this is really important, right? Sometimes we draw really cool stuff, right? We had a great exchange. So Amanda was hyping Trinity. Trinity's like, wait, don't show it. And Amanda's like, I have conviction in Trinity, right?
Like, this is your Instagram
Right.
page,
That's powerful, right? So when you practice the courage to share your work, you'll also learn that you'll begin to get other opportunities, because then people are like, whoa, I remember Tal makes something. I remember April makes something. You begin to live in people's subconscious. Then they'll employ you or work with you. That stuff's important. And consistency is key, but also not consistency in a way that self-harms yourself. So yeah, this one, you know, comic strips are the essential sentence building in comics. This one's, you know, anyone stay up late for Netflix because they're gonna wake up late, but somebody, either your spouse or somebody in the house is up early and ruins it for you, like, you know? So yeah, like I achieved a story in just 4 panels, and sometimes you can achieve it in 1. So sometimes even without a background. And again, you saw this from earlier, but they can capture history and create accessible ways of understanding complex moments, politics, and news, right? Like, comics are part of history. When folks like us couldn't read wide text or were literate, we had pictures. So again, the reason why today they try to diminish the power of artists is because we are prolific in the information sharing, and that is dangerous and radical. But yeah, there's a reason it's suppressed. Okay, ways of keeping in touch. This is my Plot Twist Publishing, my podcast. I run a comics and zine festival that I helped co-found in Vegas. don't hesitate. If you're like, I was that person in the back, I can't email me. I know that's not a thing, we like to live in the DMs, but email me if like 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, you're like, I can just critique my stuff, or like, being creative has been really hard. I'm all about community. I'm not gonna be weird. I'm always weird myself, so I'm not trying to make it weird for others. And yeah, if you make creative stuff, like I would look into Wasted Ink Zine Distro in Arizona, like, they consign like zines and whatnot. I'm a really big proponent of zines because there's a lot of barriers in the publishing industry where they only cater to white, wealthy audiences, right? And so me and Tao had a really great moment when he's showing me, Coconut TV. Like that's like rich, good content that nobody knows about, right? And so, after this, we do the work of that, right? We get to be fans of the thing that we create, and y'all are content creators, right? And be fearless with that. I think that's everything. Yay! Thank you all.